Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a genuinely fascinating educational challenge. We're going to unpack a master blueprint for teaching Istibdal Asset Waqf, which is the highly complex legal process of exchanging Waqf assets. Teaching this isn't just about blowing dust off old textbooks. It requires educators to seamlessly blend ancient Islamic jurisprudence with highly regulated modern state law. So in this explainer, we'll break down a curriculum that was designed specifically to tackle this challenge, using problem-based and case-based learning. It's an ingenious framework that literally turns passive students into active legal analysts, and we're going to explore exactly how it works.
All right, let's map out our journey for today. First up, we'll look at the dynamic concept of Waqf Istibdal. Then, we'll get into the exploration and case studies, followed by simulations and legal opinions. And finally, we'll wrap up with the outcome-based assessment scheme.
So, Section 1. The dynamic concept of Waqf Istibdal. Usually, when we think of Waqf, charitable endowments, we picture assets that are just permanently frozen in time, right? But what happens if that Waqf property is sitting directly in the path of, say, a massive new toll road or some major urban development? Well, that's exactly where Istibdal Asset Waqf comes in. It is essentially the legal exchange or transfer of Waqf assets. It's a mechanism that actually allows a sacred, theoretically permanent endowment to be swapped for something else, as long as some incredibly strict conditions are met. Grasping this core definition is absolutely crucial before we start untangling the web of rules around it.
And here is where it gets really tricky. This topic throws students right into a super demanding cognitive environment. On one hand, they've got to grapple with Classical Fiqh, analyzing the nuanced views of the four major Islamic schools of thought to figure out when an exchange is truly permissible. But on the other hand, they have to reconcile all of that with Indonesia's modern positive regulations, specifically Law No. 41 of 2004 and Government Regulation No. 42 of 2006. So they're actively synthesizing centuries-old religious principles right alongside modern bureaucratic state laws. Pretty wild, right?
So how do we actually teach them to navigate this crazy legal duality? Well, this blueprint uses 4 progressive learning stages. It scaffolds the whole journey. We go from concept exploration straight into case study analysis, then a procedure simulation, and we cap it off with legal opinion drafting. It's a carefully crafted path, really designed to take a total novice who's just learning the vocabulary and turn them into a sharp legal analyst who's fully ready to argue a complex case.
Moving right along to Section 2, Exploration and Case Studies.
Okay, so Stage 1 kicks off with solitary, asynchronous exploration on a learning management system. Basically, before they even set foot in a physical or virtual classroom, students are already diving into the foundational laws and the Indonesian Waqf Board regulations. But here's the kicker. It's not just passive reading. They're actively building mind maps to literally untangle the classical laws from the state laws, and they're taking quick quiz to make absolute sure they've nailed the basics for what comes next.
Then we hit Stage 2, and this is where the classroom really comes alive. The students are broken up into small groups for synchronous, critical case study analysis. The instructor throws real-world scenarios at them. Just imagine, for instance, a ruined historical mosque that's about to be bulldozed for a massive city planning project. Using digital collaborative workspaces, these students have to dissect the case, pinpoint the exact legal issues, and actually map out a practical way to resolve it.
And during this analysis, they are forced to confront some of the most difficult, highly subjective questions in the law. Put yourself in the student's shoes for a second and ask yourself, are the conditions of emergency or public benefit actually met here? Deciding if a genuine state of emergency justifies trading away a sacred asset? Yeah, that is definitely not a simple yes or no. It requires incredibly deep legal reasoning to balance the community's immediate needs against the original intent of the endowment.
Which brings us to Section 3. Simulations and legal opinions.
All right, now it is time to put all that theory to the ultimate test with a full-blown procedural simulation of an Istibdal application hearing. And this is fun because students are assigned very specific, totally conflicting roles. You've got the Waqf Nazir, or manager, passionately arguing for the exchange based on public benefit, and they're going head-to-head with an appraisal team that is just bringing strict, cold economic calculations to the table. Then, you've got the verifying bodies from the Waqf Board and the Ministry of Religious Affairs stepping in as the ultimate decision makers. The clash of institutional viewpoints here is intense, and it feels incredibly realistic.
Now, the educators who designed this blueprint noted that we absolutely have to address a specific stumbling block here, what they call the crucial gap. And that gap is assessing the actual equivalence of the replacement assets. This is usually where students struggle to connect theory to practice. Like, is a tiny plot of land in a booming commercial district genuinely equivalent to a massive plot out in a rural area? By forcing the appraisal team and the manager to duke it out over this exact point, the simulation suddenly feels super authentic and the stakes feel real.
After the heated debate of that role play, the energy in Stage 4 totally shifts. We go back to quiet, analytical reflection. The students have to sit down and individually draft a formal 3- to 5-page legal opinion on a highly specific Istibdal scenario. They've got to synthesize everything they've learned, make a definitive legal judgment, and then upload it for peer review, meaning they're evaluating their classmates' arguments just as ruthlessly as their own.
And look, a successful legal opinion in this setup doesn't just list a bunch of facts. It is heavily scrutinized. The grading zeroes in on a highly systematic structure, clearly laying out the case, the issue, the rules, the analysis, and the conclusion. It demands a really deep integration of the legal basis, proving that the student can seamlessly weave together Islamic fiqh and state law without contradicting themselves. Plus, it strictly demands practical, highly feasible recommendations that could literally be implemented in the real world.
All right, let's head into our final section, Section 4, Outcome-Based Assessment Scheme.
The truly brilliant part of this entire blueprint is how this outcome-based education matrix actually distributes the final grade. Only 15% is dedicated to traditional quizzes and basic theoretical knowledge. The vast majority heavily favors actual practical application. We're talking 25% for collaborative case analysis, another 25% for their performance in the role-play simulation, and a massive 35% dedicated strictly to their individual legal opinion. It sends a really clear signal to the student. Just memorizing things simply isn't enough anymore. Execution is everything.
This breakdown just perfectly captures the holistic approach of the whole curriculum. Every single assessment targets a totally distinct, vital domain of legal competence. The quizzes handle the cognitive concepts. The case studies build that necessary collaboration muscle. The role-play tests psychomotor and soft skills, like legal communication and procedural etiquette. And finally, that legal opinion? That's the ultimate test of their hard analytical skills. Literally nothing is left to chance. Every single aspect of a future lawyer's skill set gets rigorously tested.
By blending ancient wisdom with these highly complex modern regulatory frameworks and doing it through immersive case studies and simulations, this curriculum just brilliantly bridges that massive gap between the classroom and the courtroom. So, as you think about how this kind of dynamic, case-based framework could potentially revolutionize your own educational or legal syllabus, I want to leave you with this final thought. Are your students just memorizing theory, or are they truly ready to navigate the real complexities of modern legal practice? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.